Thank you so much for joining us here on day 2 of the fall ADRC meeting. Thanks, Cerise. We are very excited to have so many of you joining us here in Boston as well as online on Hublot. And we hope you had a great time yesterday hearing from the OR Core, Neuropathology Core, and Director's sessions. We hope you're feeling energized and ready to jump into another full day of engaging sessions, including the NACC session, Rec Poster session, Data Core session, CTF, and Clarity sessions. So before we begin, just a couple more notes about the Q&A for those of us who are newly joining. We have microphones in the aisles for folks in person. If you're online, you can submit your question in the chat and we will read it aloud for you. But without further ado, it's my honor to welcome to the stage Dr. Bud Kuchel as we begin the NACC section. Dr. Kuchel is the director of NACC and a professor of epidemiology at the University of Washington. Thank you, Bud, for all of your monumental contributions to NACC and the ADRC network. Welcome to the stage.
So, hi everybody. Come on in and sit down. There's plenty of great seats here. So come on in. As everybody mentioned, the ADRC program is now 40 years old, and actually I started with the University of Washington ADRC when it started in 1985 as well. So I've been doing that sort of thing for about 40 years as well. And also I started with NACC as the PI of NACC in 1999, so that we're now 25 years old as well. So we've been doing things a long time. Basically, I guess you could say it was this whole enterprise in ADRD has really been my life's work, if you want to look at it like that, other than raising my family, which is probably more important. So anyway, I just wanted to say also all of that length of time, that 25 years that we put in so far, none of it could have been done without the rest of you, without all of your help, all of the center's help, all of the clinical task forces and so on, to put together the different versions of the UDS, to establish standard data collection across the center's program that really never existed before we came into the picture. And it was difficult at the beginning, but with all your help, we've made tremendous progress, and you'll see a lot of that progress here today, as how far that we have come, the great cooperation that we've had from everyone, and the great heights that we hope to aspire to in the future. So I'm glad you're here. Come and say hello if you get the chance, and I'll bore you with some poor jokes or something else at another time. Okay, let's move on with the program. Thanks.
Thanks, Bud. It's truly amazing what you have built and accomplished over the past 25 years. Okay. So speaking of next steps, a portion of the NACC session today is going to be focused on launching UDS v4 as promised. Over the past couple of years, NACC has been working closely with the CTF and NIA to develop UDS v4, which is a new gold standard for clinical phenotypic data collection that is aligned with the latest scientific advances in the field and in our evolving understanding of best practices. UDS v4 will capture data on use of new disease-modifying drugs, social determinants of health, new concepts such as subjective cognitive decline and mild behavioral impairment, and be more inclusive. NACC, the CTF, and NIA will also be encouraging sites to capture ATN data and digital voice recordings of a neuropsychological exam. You'll hear more about that later in the session from Murda Al. I'm happy to report that 100% of the UDS v4 content and UDS v4 PDFs and REDCap forms are now complete. Thank you, everybody who teamed up on that. Our collaboration with all of you has been critical for developing and refining UDS v4. The feedback you've provided over the past couple of years, including via our recent UDS v4 pilot, will help ensure that UDS v4 can truly serve as the next gold standard for clinical and phenotypic data collection and support our goal for advancing the field. I want to thank the 23 ADRCs that participated in our UDS v4 pilot this summer. They actually deserve a round of applause as well. That was a huge amount of work. Thank you. NACC, the CTF, and EDC workgroup have acted on the valuable feedback that you provided, and it has informed key decisions about the UDS v4 launch plan. ADRCs that participated in the pilot had the opportunity to obtain IRB approval for administering the new UDS v4 forms content to participants across cognitive categories, to collect UDS v4 data with new EDC tools, to submit UDS v4 data to the NACC data platform via our new submission options, and also to leverage the UDS v4 documentation and training materials that we've put together. So our 3-month UDS v4 pilot ran from the end of May to the end of August 2024. We had, as I mentioned, 23 ADRCs that participated. 16 ADRCs tested clinical core participants, 1 ADRC tested mock participants, and 6 ADRCs did not administer to participants. Overall, 55 subjects had UDS v4 administered to them, 51 ADRC participants, and 4 mock participants who were ADRC staff. So once again, this spanned all cognitive diagnoses. So UDS v4 administration time, one of the key takeaways here is that it varies. So that is going to be the theme you're going to see here. So on average, administration time for UDS v4 was an hour more. You can see the spread. We didn't name ADRCs here, but there's quite a lot of variability in how long it takes ADRCs both to administer UDS v3 and to administer UDS v4. I will note that none of these ADRCs tested out UDS v4 on more than 5 participants, so we anticipate that this will become more streamlined as it goes. In addition, the anticipated time that ADRCs feel that they need to transition to all prospective UDS v4 data collection on their ADRC also varies quite considerably. You can see maybe where we came up with our 6-month window there, because the vast majority of ADRCs feel that they can complete UDS v4 in that time, and we are going to be working with ADRCs that feel they need more time than that to help them meet that timeline. So you can see we have a couple of outliers there, but the vast majority of ADRCs, of those 23, anticipate they will be ready to go within 6 months. Okay. So in addition to that, pilot ADRCs are making great progress towards preparing for the UDS v4 transition. So we asked how prepared they felt their site was to transition to UDS v4, and you can see that folks are feeling primarily somewhat prepared or very prepared or neutral about it. We also see that pilot ADRCs are off to a great start, leveraging the new NACC electronic data capture and submission system. So that is also very encouraging. These were things that were tested out both through our UDS v4 pilot and our NACC ID pilots that ran this summer. And you're going to hear a lot about these key takeaways from other speakers today during the NACC session, but I just want to say, we listen to your feedback. When you give us feedback in these surveys, it translates into actions that we take on our end, on the CTF's end, and in collaboration with the EDC work group. So some other speakers today are going to walk you through all the actions that we're taking in response to the feedback that you provided, the additional tools that we've put together. There's really quite a lot that has been put together for you guys. So there's a lot there. These are the resources you're going to hear about more today. If you want to get a sneak peek of those, you can go and follow along on our website. Our team has built out a beautiful web page for this that literally lays out every single resource that you could possibly need for UDS v4. So when is this all happening? Where is the 6-month window? So we're not going to dive into all this. Cerise showed you this yesterday, but we have a plan. This is just to show you a Gantt chart means a plan, so that's good. But I want to dig into this part of the plan, the actual timeline. So all of the final UDSV forums documentation are going to be available this December. We're finishing those in collaboration with the CTF. And so then we're going to, your site it will be possible for your site to start launching UDSV4 locally in January of 2025. We encourage all of you to get started. You will have a 6-month window to transition to UDSV4. Okay, so the ending in the deadline, we're providing lots of training and support. We'll talk more about that today. You can go look at our website. But there's a deadline, right? So we want everyone to have transitioned to all prospective UDSV4 for all prospective data collection at their site by the end of June 2025. So no more prospective UDSV3 beyond that date. All UDS visits will be done with UDSV4. We are going to do compliance tracking on that at NACC. Oops, it's not moving. Oh. And there are a couple of exceptions there. So we are collaborating with several partners to develop Spanish and Chinese translations of UDSV4. And so while those are still being developed, centers are invited to continue to use the UDSV3 Spanish and Chinese translations. We want to ensure there isn't a gap in being able to work with Spanish and Chinese speaking populations. There may be, together with the CTF, we may approve some centers who have, really outstanding circumstances and are going to need an extension beyond that point. But the vast majority of sites, if not all sites, will be transitioning to UDSV4 by the end of June. We're also going to need to collect all the outlying UDSV3 data. So all of your finalized packets for UDSV3 are going to be due in March of 2026. And we are developing a UDSV4 and UDSV3 public leaderboard and dashboard to help track across the program how this is going. So this is going to track how many UDSV4 packets your center has submitted, as well as the number of finalized packets. And it's going to do the same for UDSV3 as we work to get this all wrapped up across the ADRC program and this transition finalized. I want to thank, a huge thank you to the Clinical Task Force. Really, they have lent their expertise over the past 2 years to make this possible. We're not quite done yet, or almost there, but they have just been incredibly generous with their time, with their expertise, to partner with NACC and NIA to build out this incredible new tool for the field. I also want to thank the Electronic Data Capture Work Group leads and co-leads, which includes many folks on my team, who have partnered together to develop many, many resources and tools, including our entirely new electronic data capture and submission system. So thank you so much to everybody who's been a part of that effort. All right, and I'm going to pass off to Jess.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me this early morning session to talk about UDSV4. I'm going to introduce the general resources for helping you get onboarded, right? So this is something that NACC and the Electronic Data Capture Work Group has built in order to help bring everyone along with us onto UDSV4. So we have several different areas of resources. I'm going to go through the general one. So the first thing that I'm going to introduce is the checklist. This is building off of the success that NACC has experienced with having a step-by-step guide for highly technical implementations such as the SCAN project. So we are introducing and releasing a UDSV4 onboarding checklist that will go through all of the different resources, from deciding which roles you need filled at your ADRC, all the way through actually submitting data and going through the error checks. So this is something that you'll be able to use whether you're a new ADRC, or it's brief enough that if you are experienced and you've gone through a lot of the different things, that you'll be able to skip to the areas that are most relevant to you as well. This is available on the newly designed resources page, so you'll be able to go check it out today if you want and provide feedback. Another thing that we've introduced is the ADRC Program Community Forum. This is a moderated forum for ADRCs to be able to engage both with each other as well as with NACC staff. So NACC staff is moderating this, and these communications have already begun, and it's been piloted, and you can provide this feedback, or you can provide feedback to NACC as well as have conversations with each other on this forum. So this is something that you can see we've already started these conversations, and almost 200 posts were made during the pilots. If a forum is new to you, we also have several different resources that you'll be able to use in order to be able to get onboarded. So you can watch a video or go through a tutorial. You will be getting, in the next couple of weeks, an email invitation. So this is private right now, and so you'll be able to get this email, and you'll want to click through it in order to be able to go into the forum. And it's coming soon, so definitely watch out for that email and click through so that you can get on and have a conversation with each other on the forum. Another resource that you're going to see is office hours, right? So this is going to be a drop-in, recurring, open forum online where you'll be able to come in and engage with NACC technical staff and research staff, as well as a REDCap expert. So these are going to be recurring throughout the entire implementation window. So you'll be able to go on and see, drop in anytime. This is something that we've heard from your feedback, that people want the ability to be able to get real-time individual support. So it's being done online so that you'll be able to come in, you can share your screen if you want, you can ask your particular specific questions. This was something that was especially asked for during the pilot as far as API implementation, which is one of the new resources, ways of submitting data for UDS v4. So if this is something that you've been worrying about or wondering about, you have the ability now to connect directly with our staff to be able to get individual help. And this will be from January all the way through the end of the implementation window, and on a recurring basis. So you'll be able to sign up on that website, the pilot resource, or sorry, the resources website for UDS v4. So as Dr. Elliott said yesterday, thank you everyone for responding to the many surveys that go out. These are things that NACC takes into consideration and builds into our solutions. So thank you for all responding, engaging with the pilot, giving us your continual feedback. This is something that's going to continue forward as well, right? So, but based on what we've heard so far, especially from the pilot, the changes that we've made for our resources include a single website with all of our resources centralized. This is something that's available now. It's the QR code that you see on all of these slides, as well as in the back at our booths and all throughout the conference. The other thing that we did was we made some changes to the timeline. So we added additional time for you to be able to prepare, and we also made a flexible window so that you can onboard in a way that suits your center in order to advance to UDS v4. So this is the QR code to the new website, so I definitely recommend that you go and head out because this is coming soon. And we do want to hear your feedback, so definitely let us know if there's something that you want added. We do have still some time to make additions. So that's it. I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Carlson. Thanks.
Yes, we have Dr. Cynthia Carlson from Wisconsin ADRC joining us virtually.
Morning, everyone. Great to be with you this morning. I want to congratulate Bud on 25 years of hard work and bringing us to this point, and Sarah and the whole NACC team for all of their hard work. I think a lot of us realize there's a lot of hard work behind the scenes, but I don't think we really realize how much. So really take time to thank all of the NACC leaders and staff members today. Thank you to Jessica for working on these slides. They make this all seem so seamless. So again, it's a great team. So again, I'm going to talk just briefly, picking up where Jess left off about some of the clinical resources for implementing UDS4. So I'm Cindy Carlson with the Wisconsin ADRC in the clinical core and also a part of the clinical task force. So we've already heard, let me move this. Okay, there we go. So again, as Sarah mentioned, the forms are not pending small edits from the pilot feedback, but these forms are ready. So again, NACC team has done a fabulous job of getting all these forms ready so they can be proofed and read. Teams can get comfortable with them. So again, make sure you do visit the website and bring those questions. So again, these office hours, and once the community forum opens up, there'll be a chance to talk through those as well. So please take advantage of these resources. And Jess has covered a lot of the general resources that are available here, and then we'll be hearing from Dr. Doss next about the technical resources. But again, for the clinical resources, we have, in addition to the forms and the coding guidebooks, again, what we've tried to do is to bring most of the instructions that you'd need right at that moment to the page, so you don't have to go looking for the code book. But in some cases, you may want to go back to the code book as a refresher and kind of see how the question's meant to be answered or asked, etc. We have already training videos and webinars that are available on the website, and we'll talk about those next. But again, these resources are available, and keep us informed if there's other resources that you need to implement UDS4. So for example, the pilot study that many of you participated in, gathered input, and again changed some of the code book instructions, so the guidebook, so that you can know how to ask the question appropriately. So for example, here for the listing that aligns with the new OMB race ethnicity question, again, it asks what is your ethnicity and race, and lets the participant, and it tells you down here, ask the participant how they identify. So what is their race and ethnicity? And then you go from there, and then you ask clarifying questions. So you don't have to go through every single question, but ask them their perspective first, and then kind of move on from there. There are also webinars and videos. So I think at our session last year, Dr. Casas-Laketsos spoke on mild behavioral impairment, and this was very popular. So we asked him to do another webinar, kind of digging into more detail. So we have that available. Greg Jica and others did the impaired, not MCI presentation, because that was another area that people had a lot of questions on. So these videos are available online. We also had the clinical training workshop, which went through some of the forms that had the most changes on them. So you can see off to the right here, this list of presentations. You can click on the presentation that addresses the form you have questions on. There'll be more sessions coming. So the Clinical Core Steering Committee is working on some more about DSM-5, and if you have other ideas, let us know, again, through the community forum or other means. So again, we want these to be available so you and your teams can have kind of more details, but also the office hours. We'll have a chance for you to be able to get online and ask very specific questions related to questions you have. So again, for the clinical core or the clinical resources, again, the forms now have been finalized. Thank you, Sarah. There'll be, again, some additional trainings, webinars, and we're working on getting some boilerplate language for IRBs. So again, our site and some others had, the IRBs wanted very specific changes outlined, so it slowed things down. So again, we're hoping to be able to share from other sites so that we can move this forward. Also, there'll be support, as Jess mentioned, from the ADRC Clinical Forum, and then also help recommend some forms that are better to be sent to participants in advance. So for, again, the first time when they do family history, if someone has a large family and need to think through the dates of birth and their siblings or what medical problems they have, that's a good form to do ahead of time. So again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We have a lot of other sessions this afternoon. So the clinical task force will be speaking this afternoon. So please come to that session as well. And I will stop there and turn it over to Dr. Doss.
Good morning, everyone. So thank you, Jess, and Dr. Carlson for introducing us to the resources for general and the clinical one, and I will be focusing on the technical resources. Not a good, oh, this is going backwards. We hope that's not emblematic. Yes, okay, thank you. No, it was taped white, so sorry about that. All right, so the technical resources were developed with NACC for the Electronic Data Capture and Submission Group. And the Electronic Data Capture and Submission Group was launched in January 22. So Sarah and I chaired this group. And together, this group worked with NACC very closely to build the technical resources. And the focus of the group was to build a modern electronic data capture and submission system that was specifically for the UDS v4. So the Electronic Data Capture and Submission Group, it focused on getting electronic data capture from the ADRCs and submitting them into the new NACC data platform. So lots of technical advances were made by the NACC team to save time, enhance sharing, and improve the data quality. So this modern electronic data capture and submission system has multiple options for the ADRCs for their data collection. So for example, they could either use their local REDCap or an alternative local electronic data capture forms. They can continue to use paper PDFs, which are almost ready, or directly enter into the NACC REDCap system. And then simultaneously, there are lots of options for data submissions to NACC. And so very excited that for UDS v4, centers can upload data via APIs or continue to do like bulk CSV upload if that's what they were doing, or have automated submissions through REDCap. So Jess talked about general, Dr. Carlson covered the clinical resources. I'll focus today on the technical resources. So we have, with NACC working very closely, developed lots of technical resources, and a big part of that is the REDCap forms. So there's a GitHub library for those of you who are the technical people over here, where you can get copies of the forms, the coding guidebooks, and so on. And there is a whole host of technical documentation that was developed by the documentation subgroup of the electronic data collection and submission process. And you can access that to the URL over there, docs.nacdata.org. There you can download the PDFs, JSON files, XML, and whatever format that you need to implement your local EDC solution. There are all the data dictionaries. A big part of it are all the data quality rules, which are available both in human readable as well as in computable format there, and also talks about other things in REDCap, such as calculated fields, custom reporting, data access, and user roles. The EDC workgroup website that I mentioned this is just a preview of there, where you can browse through all the technical documentation that is designed for intuitive navigation and guidance at really every step of the data lifecycle. Again, a lot of the work was in developing the REDCap resource, and so these REDCap files, again, are available both in the GitHub as well as in the documentation website when you go to the file downloads page. Data is available either as like XML file, REDCap data dictionaries, or like zip files. So depending on what your center wants, there's lots of options for the ADRCs to do their data captures. There are 23 ADRCs that participated in the UDSV4 pilot. 16 of them chose to administer to the clinical core participant, but the rest of them did not get a chance. So for those of you who didn't, NACC built a sandbox for you as like a practice environment for ADRCs to test out their collection, their submission, and so on. And again, any questions you have, these are all available on the NACC website, UDSV4 updates. So together with NACC, our electronic data capture work group helped with responding to the pilot feedback. From the technical perspective, there were changes to some of the REDCap form and logic, more documentation on APIs, and hosting a sandbox environment for those of you who didn't get a chance to participate in the pilot. And one of the big parts that the EDCS work group developed was a crosswalk. This was led by Chad Murchison at UAB, ADRC, and Sarah Gothard at the OSHU and ADRC. And what these crosswalks allow are to map like the old UDSV3 and the UDSV4 variables. And again, these mapping can either be done by looking at like human readable documents or by uploads and programmatically. And lastly, there are lots of like training videos that are all available on this NACC website. So you can go to the website, UDSV4 updates. You'll be seeing a lot of this particular QR code. So, the group has put in a lot of documentation and resources to help the ADRCs transition to UDSV4.
Great. You can actually stay on stage. We're going to do a couple of questions here. If we could have Sarah and Jess rejoin, please. We do want to kick it off with a first question from someone online, which is kind of just clarifying for folks. For already existing participants, in terms of UDSV4, do they have to complete an initial packet, or do we just do their follow-up visit for UDSV4?
All the participants will have to do a new initial packet for UDSV4.
Any in-person questions? We have time for one or two.
Hi, Glenn Smith from One Florida ADRC. Yesterday, our discussions around inclusivity were really inspiring and encouraging us to up our game. So I'm concerned about the way we're addressing the linguistic minority translations, that they're coming as a later, as an afterthought. I just caution us not to talk about finalized documents until they're available to all of our different participants. And also to have you all think about, in terms of the timeline, the double burden. If we're going to be expected to launch UDS4 in our English speakers, requiring all the IRB work, training, and so on and so forth, and then for our Spanish and Chinese speakers, we have to maybe do that all over again, or at least part of that over again, because we'll be expected, I see your queries, but we'll be expected to submit all those forms in English as a protocol modification. Tell our coordinators, okay, if it's an English speaker, give this version. If it's a Spanish speaker, give the old version. And so that's burdensome to those centers trying to rise to the level of inclusivity. So I'd just have you really think about the timeline for implementation if we're going to be delayed with the versions for the linguistic minority groups.
Yeah.
Am I missing something?
Well, I want to just say, to make it very clear, we are 100% committed to ensuring that there is no gap in ADRCs being able to administer UDS to Spanish-speaking and Chinese-speaking populations. We were actually extremely proactive in securing additional funding to do these translations. And so we have an R01 that is with partners that's focused on the Chinese translation. We're able to get administrative supplement funding for the Spanish translation, and those take time to develop. The transition to UDS v4 and doing that quickly is critical for all sorts of reasons. This is capturing critical new data for the field on social determinants of health, on use of disease-modifying drugs. We need that data as a field. I wish we could flip a switch and have those translations ready immediately, but we can't. And actually, we're maintaining an entire separate data platform, our old data platform and our new data platform simultaneously, just to ensure that we do not have any gap in the ability of NACC to accept both Chinese and Spanish translations of UDS and English translations of UDS. So I totally get why that's hard at a center, and we have support to help you do that. It is challenging to do this transition, absolutely. And I think there's things to think about for next time as far as transitions to make sure those translations get started earlier. But we have invested funding, we invested time, are maintaining, like I said, 2 separate platforms because it is so important to us that we have resources available for folks speaking all of those languages.
So maybe I'm missing something here, but your timeline suggests that we should transition to UDS4 possibly before the Spanish translations are even available to us. And what I'm saying is I think you should give consideration to those centers that have large numbers of linguistic minorities, that they be able to transition all at once, not transition their English speakers at one time and their Spanish speakers or Chinese speakers at another. Does that make sense?
You may be one of those centers that needs an extension, and we'd be happy to speak with you about that and think about it one-to-one.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think we may have to move on.
I just want to affirm.
Do you have a quick question?
I think this is a quick question. So there are a number of additional consortia, I belong to 2 of them, that submit data to NACC independently of the ADRC system, and I'm wondering if and when we're expected to transition those other projects, DLBC, all FTD, there may be others.
Yeah, so our team has been meeting proactively with all of our affiliated studies partners over the past few months to make a plan for this. I don't know if the meeting with all FTD has happened yet. If not, it's going to be happening very soon to essentially make a plan with our affiliated studies partners. Like, here's where we're transitioning, what are your needs? In some cases, there may be 1 or 2 studies that continue to use UDS-V3 for a longer period of time, but we've been meeting proactively with leads, with DVCID, all of our partners essentially, to make sure that they're set up for a successful transition as well.
So maybe not the same timeline, just separate timeline.
Yeah, it's really a study-by-study decision as we kind of examine things and what the needs are. Yeah, thank you. Okay, we'll go on to the next.
That concludes our...
Please come to our booth if you have more questions.
Thank you.
Hi again. Okay. Oops. So as I mentioned during the director session yesterday, NACC has been making major progress in deploying our new data platform. I'm excited to update you further on what is new and where we are headed. So NACC's next generation platform is at the heart of our mission to revolutionize multimodal data collection, integration, interoperability, discoverability, and access by creating a one-stop shop for ADRC program data. Our modern cloud-based data platform is more multimodal and interoperable and provides easy access to increasing quantities of data that is standardized, high quality, harmonized, and integrated. Over the past year, we have migrated our existing data onto the new data platform, including UDS, neuropathology, and our mixed protocol MRI and PET data. We're also in the process of building new pipelines to integrate digital data and biomarkers, digital neuropathology, and real-world data. We're also expanding or establishing interoperability with other key NIA-funded repositories. For example, we're working with NIGADS and NCCRAD, as we mentioned yesterday, to integrate their ADRC participant metadata analysis data within the NACC data platform to make it easier for researchers to access these critical data streams alongside other ADRC participant data at NACC. We're also in the process of establishing this type of interoperability with the AD Knowledge Portal and the newly funded Brain Digital Slide Archive. Our growing collaboration with partners are central to our efforts to make increasing amounts and varieties of high-quality, harmonized and integrated data freely available to researchers to advance the field. A key example of this is our partnership with SCAN. Over the past few years, we've been working closely with SCAN to identify and address barriers through outreach to sites, to facilitate ADRC participation and engagement via startup checklists, new website, and ADRC leaderboard, to support data quality through real-time QC dashboards that you all have access to via your ADRC portals, and to make SCAN data available to the global research community. So thanks, I'm delighted to share that together our efforts have been wildly successful. So as shown here, we have seen a massive increase in SCAN submissions across the ADRC program over the past couple of years. Thanks to our partnership with SCAN, researchers everywhere can now access analysis results on more than 6,000 standardized MRI and PET scans via the NACC data front door. It takes 15 minutes to make a request through our quick access file data request system, and you get our data within 24 hours. Dr. Bill Jagas will be sharing some more of the exciting outcomes of our collaboration with SCAN at the end of the session today. So the Clarity Initiative builds off of our successful partnership with SCAN. I encourage you to all join the Clarity session later today to learn more about how we're leveraging and building off of NACC's operational informatics infrastructure to collect critical new data in partnership with Clarity. So over the past few months, NACC has made great headway in expanding as well the ADRC portals. The portals are designed to empower all of your ADRCs with streamlined participant management and multimodal data submission and access, and are a key component of the new NACC data platform. I'm excited to share some of our new ADRC portal features with all of you. So you can now access all of the ADRC portal tools via a new single sign-on system powered by CI Logon. This is going to make it a lot easier to use these portals. The portals are also the go-to destination for assigning NACC IDs now to participants at the time of consent once we launch that new NACC ID process in January of 2025. To succeed at becoming more multimodal, we had to update our approach to unique identifiers at NACC. The new NACC ID process that we are deploying this January requires all ADRCs to assign NACC IDs at the time of consent and includes new automated verification steps. This enables data streams to be submitted to the NACC data platform in any order and ensures that each one is associated with the correct NACC ID. This is also very important for our affiliated studies. Our new NACC ID system was tested by 32 ADRCs via a 1-month pilot this past summer. Thank you again to everyone who participated in that. And I'm happy to share that 97% of the pilot participants reported feeling prepared or very prepared to assign NACC IDs via our new process. So you can learn more about all of our plans to launch the new NACC ID process from my colleague Jess Welch, who you heard from earlier, at our informational webinar on November 13th. All administrators especially are encouraged to join that. The portals are also an access point for NACC's new electronic data capture and submission system, which Dr. Das mentioned earlier. This is where ADRCs will go to submit UDS data, as well as many other data types in the future. Over the past 2 years, NACC has collaborated with Electronic Data Capture Workgroup to build this new streamlined, modern, and flexible electronic data capture and submission system. It was recently test-driven by 23 ADRCs via UDSV4 pilot and is ready to go for UDSV4. So feedback from pilot participants indicates that ADRCs are off to a great start using this new system. The ADRC portals are also where you can go to view, audit, and access all of your participant data. This now includes your participant data from more partner repositories and initiatives. If you log into your portal today, you can now access SCAN dashboards for tracking the QC status of your SCAN submissions and view and download all the SCAN variables available for your participants. As of this week, thank you to our partnership with NIGADS and the great work of actually a new team member, Emily Chang, on the NACC team, you can now also access GWAS and imputation data for your participants via the portal. Here's a closer look at what an individual ADRC scan QC PET dashboard looks like. Over the coming months, you will also be able to access even more data types via your ADRC portals, including UDS, neuropathology, MRI PET, fluid biomarkers, and clarity data as it becomes available. Lastly, the ADRC portals are where you'll be able to access up-to-date and on-demand program-wide reports and dashboards. This will include diversity dashboards that will track the results of recruitment efforts across the ADRC program. Another major initiative we are prioritizing at NACC is the building of the data front door, a one-stop shop where researchers anywhere can access all ADRC participant data. As mentioned previously, there are now scan results available on many participants via our quick access file data request system. The data front door will also include a series of real-time data dashboards. You can visit our Scan Public dashboard today for real-time numbers on how much standardized and QC'd MRI PET data and analysis data results are available to the research community from across the ADRC program. A new feature of the NACC Data Front Door is our secure enclave on NIA's linkage platform. This new pilot platform and associated governance strategy was developed in partnership with 3 ADRCs through our COVID-19 administrative supplement. It will allow approved researchers to analyze EHR, genetic, phenotypic, and claims data from consented ADRC participants within a secure enclave environment. And finally, we want researchers to be able to build their own multimodal data sets that include any data streams available via the NACC data platform or our partner repositories. We have been collaborating with partners like NICRAD and NIGAD and other ADRD researchers to define requirements for our cohort browser tool. This tool will enable researchers to build their own multimodal data sets across NACC and partner repositories. For example, we want researchers to be able to use this tool to select all of the participants with a specific genetic mutation that got below a certain score on a specific neurocognitive exam and that had a recent PET exam indicating high amyloid levels. The cohort browser tool prototype that we will be launching in 2025 will enable researchers to build and visualize multimodal cohorts across repositories using facets or search fields. Researchers will then be able to download a quick access file with a list of IDs for their cohort for data retrieval from NACC and partner repositories. We're also developing strategies to further streamline this process down the line through automating the data request process from partner repositories and other mechanisms. We're really optimistic that our flexible data platform, together with the high-quality multimodal data that we're making readily available for the same ADRC participants via the data front door, will help empower researchers to tackle the most pressing questions in the field and increase data utilization across all repositories. I want to once again call out the NACC team, who has been instrumental, of course, in making all of this happen, and encourage all of you once again to reach out to them today and say hello. Okay, thanks everyone.
And now I would like to welcome to the stage Dr. Kristen Russ from NICRAD. That's okay. Sorry, that was a long walk. Okay. So, I get the pleasure of talking to you a little bit about what the fluid biomarker work groups have been doing to help with data collection and sharing for biomarkers. So as we all know, the use of biospecimens and biomarkers is skyrocketing as we move forward in this field, and being able to share that data is essential. And to be able to facilitate that, the ADRC Biomarker Steering Committee put together 2 work groups to help provide guidance and help develop tools through which you'll be able to share that data. So there are 2 work groups that were developed. The biomarker best practices group was tasked with putting together a document that's going to be a resource for everyone doing biomarker sample collection. It'll be able to work through the different types of pre-analytical variables and how to sort of get around issues with those. And that'll be something that will be delivered to you once they complete that, guidelines document. And then we also have the biomarker data variables and data quality work group. So I'm a co-lead of that, and I have another wonderful co-lead, Fanny Elahi. So we were tasked with determining key data fields that would be necessary to be able to share that data alongside clinical data at NACC. So NACC was nice enough to put together this wonderful chart for you. So it shows you basically from collection of samples all the way through sharing of data. So at the ADRCs, you guys are doing a wonderful job of collecting samples. And then so you can see that that's where the best practices group is coming in to provide those guidelines. Now, once you have that sample, the samples may go to NCCRAD through ADCFB, or there might be local analysis or analysis by labs that your local ADRC has chosen. So if they go through NCCRAD and they're part of ADCFB, that data is going to automatically be sent to NACC. Once it reaches NACC, it will be provided to you through the ADRC portals. Your ADRC will have 90 days with it. We have an embargo period that it can't be shared during that time. But once that embargo period is up, it will be able to be shared with all researchers through the data front door. Now, if it's more of a local analysis, if you're doing it at your ADRC or the data is returned directly to your ADRC from a different lab, then that's an optional share. So you'd be able to decide whether you want to share that data with NACC or not. If you do share that data, it will go through the process to go into the data front door, and researchers will be able to request that data. Now, the biomarker data variable and data quality work group is working to put together a way for you to share that data. So there's going to be two different levels of data entry. There's going to be a protocol level entry, and there's going to be a participant level entry. The protocol level entry is going to be a one-time entry per study. So I'm going to use ADCFB as an example. So we would go in, we would list that study, and then we would use the protocol for that study to enter the information about the variables. So we'd be looking for things like the protocol ID, what did you ask for a fasting status, what was the centrifugation speed, stuff that should be listed in a protocol and should be standard. So anything that's in bold is going to be a required field. Anything that's in italics would be something that we'd request, but it wouldn't stop you from being able to submit if you did not fill that out. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow streamlined entry so that these variables can be attached to a batch upload of participant data. So now let's talk about the participant level data. So this will be entered as batch uploads. You'll be given a template to be able to enter this information with the variables listed. And then again, the bold variables are ones that we're going to require, and the italics is the ones that we're requesting. And as you can see, you list the study ID. So that would be what you put in as that one-time entry. So we're going to ask for all of these different things. You have ones that are more related to the collection of the sample, and then you have a portion of these variables that are related to the lab side of things. So the biomarker concentration, lot number for the kits, catalog number for the kits, so that we are able to provide this to a researcher who's requesting the data. So as part of this process, if there's no deviations from that standard protocol that you entered in that first portion, then that information will automatically be attached to the participant. If you list there that there was a deviation during collection, say the time to centrifuge was 4 hours because there was an issue, then you'll be prompted to list the deviation that occurred just for that participant. And the team from the work group is working with the tech team at NACC to figure out how to streamline that for you all, because our main goal is to be able to get the data in the most streamlined possible way, because we know that you guys are busy. We know that you have a lot of participants. We want to make sure that this is an easy process for you. So that brings me to thank all of the work group co-leads, as well as the committee that put together the group and the rest of the team, because they put a lot of time and effort into this. And here's your call to action. So I know you guys have opinions, and I want to hear them. So here's your opportunity to give them to us, because really we do take this into consideration, because we want you to be able to use this. We don't want to provide you a tool that's not useful for you. So use the QR code, take your opportunity to ask questions and provide comments, and I promise you, if nobody else reads them, I will. So, all right, thank you so much. Now, welcome to the stage Dr. Gil Rabinovich from UCSF ADRC.
Thanks. So I'm going to talk about a new optional form that will be rolled out after the UDS4 rollout that will allow us to capture the revised criteria for diagnosis and staging of AD. So as everyone knows, there have been revised criteria that have been published since the development of UDS4. There are a lot of reasons why we might want to capture these criteria in NACC data. For example, if you're doing a study, you may want to just select people who do or do not meet the criteria. You might want to use the biological staging in your studies. And actually, NACC and ADRC network is an excellent platform to test the new criteria and how they're working. And so in order to meet this gap, NACC convened a task force to determine how we can capture these revised criteria in the ADRC network. So the task force determined that the highest priority are to capture biomarkers that are in the new criteria considered diagnostic. In terms of the fluid biomarkers, for plasma, this is currently only p-tau217, or the percent of phosphorylated to non-phosphorylated p-tau217. In the CSF, the biomarkers that are considered diagnostic are just ratios. So the A-beta 42 to 40, p-tau 181 to A-beta 42, or total tau to A-beta 42. And so those are the biomarkers that we focused on in this form. And then we also want to be able to capture the biological staging of AD, which currently can only be done by tau PET, according to the published criteria, but we anticipate that that will evolve, and hopefully there will be fluid biomarkers that will allow for staging in the near future. And so there's a temporary plan and an ultimate plan on how to capture this in UDS. So the temporary plan, as I mentioned, is to roll out a form that will be optional for sites. It will be in addition to the UDS4 packet. It will be rolled out after the UDS4 rollout. The results, as we saw, will be shared through the various portals, and it will allow you to select participants based on the criteria. And you'll get a gold star from NACC, and we'll have leaderboards showing which centers are completing this optional form as incentives. Now, the ultimate plan, of course, is to integrate this data collection into UDS. And so in parallel, as this optional form is rolling out, there'll be a plan to integrate the data collection, particularly into Form D1B. And also, we want to make this as light a lift for the sites as possible. So the vision is really that a lot of the biomarker data that will be captured will be auto-populated as you fill out these forms. You won't have to look it up at another location. So just to give you a sense of what the pilot form looks like, again, there are a lot of core 1 fluid biomarkers that are mentioned in the criteria paper, but we are only going to focus on the ones that are considered diagnostic. And so here's an example of what this looks like for plasma biomarkers. There's a first question that says, were the plasma biomarkers used for the etiologic diagnosis? If no, you're done. If yes, it asks you which one. Right now for plasma, it's only p-tau217. Hopefully that will evolve. You're then asked to say, was the result normal or abnormal? If you used a p-tau217 values, there's an additional question about whether the analysis, the biomarker was measured by NICRAD or locally, and if locally, was it using a NICRAD validated protocol or a non-NICRAD validated protocol? And here's just a similar question for CSF biomarkers using the p-tau 181 A-beta 42 ratio, but it's the exact same set of questions for this fluid biomarker. For PET, for amyloid PET, which is a core 1 biomarker, again, you're asked, did you use it or not? If you did, was it elevated or not elevated? If And then there's another question about how you determine the amyloid PET status. So was it based on a visual read, a quantitative measurement, or both? And then also a question about whether the interpretation was done locally or centrally through Clarity, SCAN, ADNI, or other studies that are doing central reads. For tau PET, we are again using the criteria, so there's an opportunity to say not elevated, which would be biomarker stage A, elevated only in the medial temporal lobe, which would be stage B, or elevated in the neocortex, which is stages C and D. And so then finally, we ask a question, did the participant meet the biological biomarker criteria for AD based on a positive core1 biomarker, no or yes? If yes, which core1 biomarker or biomarkers were used to make that determination? For staging, from earlier data that you complete about tau PET, we'll be able to determine the stage. This will be auto-populated. So again, if there's no tau PET uptake, it would be staged as biomarker stage A. If it's in the medial temporal only for tau PET, that would be B. And if it's in the neocortex, right now we're not distinguishing between moderate to high, so that would be stages C or D, or maybe you didn't do tau PET and cannot determine stage at this time. We're also using the clinical staging that's in the criteria paper. This is also FDA compliant. I think everyone is familiar. It's very similar to the staging that we use through the global CDR and other measures in the ADRC, but it's this 0 to 6 clinical staging, so you get a two-dimensional staging of disease, 0 to 6 based on clinical stage, and A through D based on biological stage. And so we are definitely looking for ADRCs who are interested in piloting this form. If you're using biomarkers and are going to be early adopters of these criteria, please do sign up. It'll be very helpful to get some feedback as people are piloting this form. So here's the QR code. And then just to end, I want to thank all the people who helped us with this task force. You can see a lot of familiar names here. And happy to take questions. Thank you very much.
Yes, if you have a question, please line up in our aisle mics for either Gil or Kristen.
Can you go back to Gil's QR?
Can we go back to the QR code for Gil's presentation? Thank you. I will also ask if our NACC team can put that URL in the Hubelo chat. Thank you.
So I think the criteria is really a great idea, and I can see how hard you worked on the form. I wondered if there was a committee that thought through the process of doing that in terms of consequences to sharing the data back with the participant, and with the need to share with the IRB the fact that you're making clinical diagnoses on biomarkers that may or may not be CLIA approved. So I suspect there's some consequences here. Have we thought them through, or has anyone addressed them?
You bring up a lot of good points, Mary, that I think we'll have to think through. Right now, this is intended to be research use and a research diagnosis. It is.
That said clinical.
Well, it's the etiologic diagnosis that you're putting into NACC. Now, whether that's the clinical diagnosis that you're releasing to participants and how that interfaces with return of results is a separate question. I expect the clinical task force will have to, sort of tackle that and how we're using biomarkers. I think we are in a really interesting transition period in the centers where increasingly we are going to use biomarkers for clinical diagnosis, return results. This is beginning in Clarity with return of amyloid PET results and tau PET results, and may grow throughout the ADRC system. So we're going to have to figure out how we do this. We really are in an exciting transition period in the field. But for this form specifically, we were not thinking, to answer your question, about all the downstream IRB implications, really just focus on how can we capture the data in the most streamlined way possible that will add the minimal burden but will still be helpful in the NACC data set.
Hi, I have 3 quick questions for Kristen. Iris length data core Wake Forest ADRC. So for the samples sent to NACC, would you do the batch, so the samples from one ADRC on the same batch, or you put all the, when you have several batch from different ADRCs, you do them at the same time?
So usually the sites are mixed in our runs, and so that'll be uploaded to NACC together, but NACC will have a system for separating them out and just returning them to the ADRC that they belong to.
I mean the blood samples, if NACC is processing them when you do the lab works, do you do them at the same time, or?
So we receive plasma in the lab, and so the plasma goes, if we're doing quanterics, it goes on a plate that's balanced by, age and gender and longitudinal. So your samples would be on a plate that have multiple ADRC samples on it.
Okay, so the different centers could be done together?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And for the data come back, so we do have the batch data, we have individual level, and then do we have the lab level data, like which plate when you do your assay they're on? So if we have like 200 participants from Wake Forest, do we know like 50 or 10 from the same plate when you do your analysis, or we don't know that information?
Well, so we return the run date, so that would tell you what day it was run, so you'd know if they were run on the same date. But if it's coming through NCCRAD will be the ones to enter that information for you, so you wouldn't necessarily have to worry about it, but you would have the information that
we do have. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Kristen.
If we can just move things along to Renaud.
Great, thank you. My question is about the forms for the diagnosis. What about core 1 biomarkers disagreeing? Having multiple core 1 biomarkers, p-tau 217, amyloid PET, and CSF, if they contradict, you have one form per specific biomarker, but you have this final one where you have to say if the patient fulfills criteria. How do you take this into account, especially given that not all the biomarker results are going to come at the same time? I know we're going to have the amyloid PET, we can say amyloid positive. If 2 months later we get a biofluid marker that contradicts, how do we factor that in?
It's a great point. We haven't yet dealt with the issue of discordant biomarkers. We are going to ask the sites to write which core 1 biomarkers were used and whether they were normal or abnormal. So we will have data. So for example, if you do a plasma p-tau 217 and that was abnormal, and you do an amyloid PET and it was non-elevated, we'll capture that. But in terms of ultimately answering the question, do they meet the criteria or not, it's going to be up to the site to determine which core 1 biomarker they use to make that determination. So we'll have some data about discordant biomarkers, only the ones that are considered diagnostic, and the site will have to make the determination about what is, whether they do or do not meet the criteria. But there may be a smarter way, there probably is, and love to get your input on how to deal with a discordant biomarker situation.
Yeah, I think just the main problem I can think about is just the timeline. And some biomarkers are going to come faster than others, so they're going to have more of a weight in what ends up in the form.
Yeah, the timeline is going to be very different, I expect, across different centers. And this is another, sort of transition period. The hope is that we'll have a lot of biomarkers in time for consensus, but that's clearly not the case now. And so how do we implement that? I think each ADRC is going to use the biomarkers that are available to them at the time of the consensus, and it may be that at the baseline visit there's no biomarker data available, and at the follow-up visit a year later there's a whole panel of them available. So,
looking forward.
Thank you, Dr. Lajoie. All right, one final question from Dr. Mormino.
Yeah, Gil, I think the forum is excellent and very timely. And I guess I just want to rephrase maybe Renaud's statement of the problem is more of like an opportunity. So I think this is a key opportunity to understand how the sites, kind of in the real world, but not quite real, are integrating this kind of rich, multidimensional information. And I guess I wanted to ask if there's any plans so you guys are going to get all this data and understand kind of discordance and how sites are using these different biomarkers, but it might be worth maybe following up with sites, like kind of doing a qualitative survey too, to understand, kind of the devil in the detail of how they're rating the tau scans, how they're dealing with the timing offsets and things like this. I think that would be a nice summary of how the implementation is actually working across sites. And I imagine there is going to be a lot of heterogeneity that will be quite interesting.
I agree, and absolutely there is a plan to collect input from sites in terms of how they're implementing the form and the biomarkers in their diagnostic process so we can understand that better and think about how to approach it from a network point of view as well.
Great, thank you. That concludes our Q&A. Now welcoming to the stage Dr. Rhoda Oh from Boston University ADRC to talk about UDSV4 digital voice.
All right. Morning, everyone. So I get to talk to you again about digital voice. And as Sarah has noted, digital voice is coming to UDS, sort of. It is considered optional, and but nonetheless, even though it is optional, we are part of the NACC plan. So we have actually been developing a lot of resources for those of you who are looking to add digital voice as part of your UDS 4.0. And we have a booth back there, actually, that has a lot of these resources here. There are people there to help answer questions, show you how to do it. And of course, we have these resources online as well. And we continue to work with NACC in terms of how do we bring these voice recordings in. So what I'm going to do now with the remaining 4 minutes I have is to take those of you who are still on the fence about whether you want to do digital voice, and hopefully you'll come away thinking that it's not optional, but it's actually something that you should really think about doing. So I'm going to actually start with a little history lesson, because I'm going to remind everybody that years ago, and I've been at this long enough to remember, when we started to do MRI scans. And the question is, why did we start doing MRI scans? And it's because we could see the progression of the disease structurally, right? The other thing I'm going to remind everybody is today, we all know about FreeSurfer. But way back when, and again, I've been old enough to know when that was, when FreeSurfer first came out, it was the first attempt to start standardizing assessments, right? Analysis of MRI scans. It started with version 1. It actually started out just doing total and lobar volumes. And then over the years, it added different features. And today, it's actually considered one of the most well-used standardized way to assess MRI, right? And it's used by many, many, many studies that are well known to us. And it's going beyond how we use it into other areas of interest. So with that context, I want to have you just listen for a minute.
It ferments. Fermentation.
So this is a person who was asked this particular task, and when they were cognitively attacked, that was their first response. Now I want you to listen to the same participant as they're getting older.
Because it mixes with the sugar and the flour. It mixes with the flour. I guess there's some sugar in there.
And then, same question again when they've progressed to dementia.
It combines with the the wheat in the bread. And the yeast
So I think you can hear, just like we can see in imaging across the progression, we can hear it in the voice. So to that end, what we are trying to do with the technology clinical task force is we want to become the free surfer of digital voice. And we have actually mapped out sort of that roadmap of how we're going to take the digital voice recordings that you're doing and convert it into science. And we're doing this across with some of our collaborators. Now, one of the things is voice, what you can do with voice is what you can do today. So you don't have to wait, you can do it today. There are actually open source tools available to you. So for audio features, we have OpenSmile, and for text to extract and do transcriptions and linguistic analyses, we have Whisper. And we have used those tools already. So we have associated this with neuropsych, with imaging, with cognitive health, doing it in an automated way, very important. This is not manual, this is all automated. We've looked at it in terms of mild cognitive impairment, dementia, and prognostically. So this is science that can happen today if you start collecting it today. Now, we have other tools that we're working on. We're only at version 1.0, right? And so we're thinking a lot about how do we now de-identify these voice recordings. So for instance, if people provide any personal identifying information while they're giving you their responses, we're figuring out how do you detect it and splice it out. The other thing that we're really trying to do is figure out how do we make those audio recordings shareable. So I'm going to give you an example. This is a source original.
Hi, I am Norman Dauladabad, and I'm testing a voice conversion system that preserves the emotions of the speaker.
So now I'm going to give you an example of that same recording altered.
Hi, I'm Norman Dauladabad, and I'm testing a voice conversion system that preserves the emotions of the speaker.
And then we have
another
example.
I'm Norman Dauladabad, and I'm testing a voice conversion system that preserves the emotions of the speaker.
So these are all conversions of that original in order to try to figure out how do we then protect the confidentiality and privacy of the individual. And what we're doing right now is we're now checking to see what do we lose? How does this altering, and then when we process it, what do we still retain and what do we use? So this is all things that are coming soon. And so with that, I want to thank everybody. This is the team. This is just a small part of the team that helps us get to where we're at. Great. Thank you.
And we have time for one question. I also want to take this chance to plug that there is a UDSB4 digital voice booth in the back of the room if you want to stop by and ask further.
So I hope you're all convinced. You're all going to now collect digital voice. Many of you already are. There's probably over 20 ADRCs that are already collecting digital voice. We just got to get the rest of you there.
Great. Thanks, Dr. O.
Okay, thanks.
Up next, we have virtually presenting Dr. Bill Jagast of UC Berkeley, the co-PI of the SCAN project.
Hello, good morning. I'm going to give you an overview of where we are with SCAN. Here's the team, and I just want to remind you of the goal. What we're doing is we're taking all the images that have been collected over all the ADRCs, analyzing them with a standard pipeline, making the data broadly available, and they're also harmonized with existing data sets. So what we're doing in SCAN is the same thing that we're doing in Clarity, and it's the same thing that we're doing in ADNI. And in fact, there are other data sets that these data are harmonized with as well. So this is really an update of where we are as of today and a little bit about where we're planning to go. So this is the data upload situation. There's been an incredible increase in the amount of data that's come to us. We have close to 5,000 PET scans and 6,000 MR exams. And then I'm going to take you through how these data go through our pipelines and where they are in relation to sharing and what you can actually download. Before I do that, let me just show you that the MR work is really substantial. We've had 6,000 MR exams submitted to SCAN, but that means 33,000 series. A series is a sequence, so a T1, a flare, et cetera. So 33,000 series have to be weighted through, and actually of those, about half of them fail QC. So there's a lot of data sorting that has to go on in SCAN, and it really takes a lot of effort on behalf of the MRI core. But where we're left with now is we have close to 5,000 T1s and a little over 4,000 flares that have passed QC and that have been run down our pipeline. So far, most of the data that we've evaluated have come from the affiliated studies. So those are R01s. And the vast majority of these really have been generously contributed by the ADRCs, because most of this is not supported by ADRC funds. So these scans come in through these affiliated studies. And that's the upload number that I just showed you. And then for PET, what happens is they get QC'd and pre-processed. So we a little bit slows the process down a little bit. Then they're analyzed. So we have about 3,500 scans that have been completely analyzed, and then linking them to the NACC data is the last step. And for MRI, we're in a similar situation where they have to go through the QC. They're analyzed and then linked to the NACC data. So there's quite a lot of data that's available, that's been analyzed. It's shared. It's actually available to you to download and linked to the NACC data. Now there's just one other thing, which is that for the future, as Clarity ramps up and as the P30 funding ramps up, these numbers are really going to increase. So there's a lot now, but there's a lot more coming, because Clarity and P30 are going to fund 1,700 scans per year, exams per year, or MR exams and PET scans per year. So this is going to be a lot of data coming down the pipe, which will all go down this same pipeline. This is what it looks like in terms of participants. Those were scans. So these are the number of participants, and there's about 1,600 individuals with amyloid PET scans, close to 1,000 individuals with tau PET scans, 365 with FDG PET, and close to 3,000 with MRI T1s. I'm just talking about the T1s here. And these are the breakdowns by diagnosis. You can see the majority of these are cognitively normal individuals. One of the things about this is that there are all these different modalities, but one of the problems we have now in the database is that they don't overlap all that well. So this is the Venn diagram of how many have had each modality, and you can see there's a small number that have had all three modalities. And when you start to break down the overlap between modalities, there's more of them, but there's still quite a few that have only one scan, amyloid, tau, or MR. And so we think this is going to change for a couple of reasons. First, we're going to be reaching out to the ADRC. So we may be contacting your center to see if we can dig up MRI scans, for example, on people who have amyloid and tau PET or tau PET scans, et cetera. So we're going to try to normalize this as far as the modalities. But also, as we move ahead to Clarity and P30, those funding streams are going to support multiple modalities. So we think that individuals will be scanned with all three of these modalities in the future. I'm just going to show you a little bit of data because I want you to see what I find exciting, which is that the data looks really promising. Here we have the amyloid PET by tracer. So each dot is a different tracer, but they're uniform on the centiloid scale. There's our threshold, a threshold you could use for amyloid positivity. And really what I want you to see is that regardless of the tracer, the distribution of the centiloids across the diagnoses is very similar. So these tracers seem to be very well behaved as far as tracking amyloid across diagnoses, and the scanner doesn't seem to make a difference, the center doesn't seem to make a difference, and the tracer doesn't seem to make a difference. It's actually also pretty encouraging to look at the data for tau PET. Here, again, we just have the diagnoses, and I've split them by the tracers, fluorotaucipir on the left and MK6240 on the right. And you can see that the general pattern of tau tracer uptake is very much the same regardless of which tracer we're talking about. So that's encouraging. But actually, when we start to look at the correlations, looks even better. Here's the amyloid PET for fluortaucipir versus entorhinal cortical tau. And here's amyloid PET in MK6240, the entorhinal tau. And you can see that the correlation between amyloid and tau is pretty much the same for both tracers. Just, you know, they're not the same subjects, of course, but the correlations are very similar. And again, for the metatemporal SUVR, a more advanced stage of tau deposition, amyloid, regardless of the tracer, is well correlated with the tau in fluortaucipir and for MK. Here we have some data from the MR core, the hippocampal volume, and you see on the left hippocampal volume by diagnosis, again, looking very much like what we would expect. A lot of what I'm showing you is kind of a sanity check, you know, to make sure the data are looking right. And here, again, we see the correlation between entorhinal SUVR for fluortaucipir on the left and MK6240 on the right, versus hippocampal volume. And again, the size of the correlation is very similar for both tracers. And lastly, the hippocampal volume and white matter hyperintensities in relationship to age and cognitive status with the MoCA. You can see hippocampal volume in its relationship to age and in relationship to the MoCA here, and white matter hyperintensities. And again, we have very large numbers for this because many of our participants have MRI scans. Okay, I just want to point out a few other things that are in the database and that we're doing. And one of these is that the MR core reviews each scan and charts and quantifies these things that we might call associated findings or medical findings. So we have things like measurements of subcortical infarcts, hemorrhagic infarcts, venous abnormalities, superficial siderosis, and cerebral microbleeds, quite a few of those. So these are also all charted and available in the database. Finally, I want to make a point about the data we're getting. We're getting some scans that come through the MRQC core with substantial lesions. You can see these. They're areas of stroke, probably stroke, encephalomalacia, craniotomy artifacts, and so forth. You can see these quite substantial. And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. We don't do clinical reads and provide feedback to the sites of the MR scans. So we are assuming that each ADRC is responsible for their own clinical read. And, you know, just to make that point, sometimes we get the MR scans uploaded many months after they've been obtained. So we're assuming that that's handled at the level of the ADRC. It's also worth pointing out that, you know, these are fine to upload. They're in the database. They're marked as having these large lesions, but in many cases we can't quantitatively analyze them. They just won't run through our pipelines. There's sometimes very little we can do with them. So just to make sure that everyone's aware of that. Finally, I want to take one minute to talk about the future. We are up for review, and we're putting in our renewal next spring. And I just want to tell you a little bit about what we're thinking of. I think over the next few months, we're going to be coming to you through the imaging steering committee and the clinical committees to see what you want from SCAN. But this is what we're thinking as of now. Obviously, we're going to continue doing what we're doing. It all seems to be working now very well. And we're expecting a substantial workload. I've already kind of given you this in terms of the annual workload, but over the course of the next 5 years, we're talking about 8,500 amyloid, 8,500 tau, and 8,500 MR exams is what we predict added to the current database. As I mentioned, these are going to be processed identically through Clarity, through the P30 funding, through affiliated studies, are also processed the same as ADNI. We have been talking with the group at UCSF, and they are, of course, doing visual reads of scans for Clarity, and we want to make SCAN and Clarity as similar and as compatible as possible. So we are, at the current time, contemplating providing visual reads of amyloid and PET scans for the P30 funded studies and providing those back to the ADRCs the same way that this is happening for Clarity. We're doing the data analysis for Clarity, I'll remind you. And finally, we've been talking about adding ultra-fast MR and myelin imaging as options to the MR exam. So that's where we're at with SCAN. Just to remind you, if you go to the NACC website, you can request these data. The MR data are available, the PET data are available, and the actual defaced MR and PET images are available as well. Thank you.
Okay, let's give it up for our NACC session speakers. Thank you so much.